This next company appeared last year in the Year Nah Awards. They won an award, which they shouldn't be proud of. They might win again this year. We shall see. Since Tauranga man Scott Costa raised concerns with the Commerce Commission about Air New Zealand's pricing, more regional travellers have come forward voicing their frustration with the national carrier. If you missed Scott's story, in short, he was trying to fly his daughter back to university in Wellington over Easter weekend. This was from Tauranga to Wellington, only to find one-way tickets ranging from $430 up to $735. This is one way. To put that in perspective, he said he's flying to LA in November for just $640 each way. Sure, we all know holiday fares, they spike, and if you book early, you can get a better deal. But still, many feel domestic airfares are simply price gouging. Air New Zealand's Chief Financial Officer Richard Thompson says it's not profiteering, just inflation. He claims the airline's operating costs have surged nearly 30% since the pandemic. And while they're hugely sympathetic to passengers, rising costs across the board have made fare increases unavoidable. Now the government's taking notice. Associate Transport Minister James Meagher isn't ruling out underwriting the growth of smaller regional airlines to help keep routes alive and prices competitive. To talk us through this and the wider issues facing the aviation sector, I'm joined by Irene King. She's a welcome onto the show as usual, Director of IQ Aviation, GM for Ardmore Flying School and seasoned aviation commentator. Irene, a very good afternoon to you.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. But Irene, look, airfares have always been a sore point for travellers. We know this. We get that running an airline isn't cheap. But when Air New Zealand is rolling out brand new uniforms at the same time, charging up to $735 one way from Tauranga to Wellington, it feels like a bit of a tough pill to swallow, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I think pre-COVID we got used to really competitive airline pricing right around the globe, and New Zealand was no exception. Yeah.
Was it really then the right time to splash out on a full uniform revamp?
You know, I don't think it's ever the right time to you know, I'm a cheapskate marketeer, you know, repainting aircraft, rebranding, etc. You know, you always raise your eyebrows, but look, it's never a good time to do that sort of stuff. But I think the issue really here is, are they price gouging? Are they profiteering? I don't think they are doing any of that. I just think their pricing philosophies and pricing strategies are wrong. And, you know, I think that they have, you know, they operate and they live and they benefit from the New Zealand market and the New Zealand taxpayer. Yeah. Now, I know in the business I run, and our inputs are, yes, we're a smaller scale, but very similar inputs to New Zealand. You know, if I got a 24% price increase, you know, I'd be laughing all the way to the bank. Yeah. We have averaged, I think, over the same sort of period. We've had the same inflation. That's the point I was making. You know, same input, smaller scale. Yeah. So our inflation has been about 30%. But you know, the absolute maximum I've been able to increase price is about 14 or 15%.
Yes.
And you know, we have had to suck up the difference. And look, it makes life hard and challenging for managers, but that's what we pay them to do. Now, why do we suck it up and they don't suck it up? They just up their prices. Well, you know, because we're subject to much tighter controls. We work in the education sector. You know, we've got tight price control on us. Now, Air New Zealand to me is heading, you know, if they don't change their philosophies, they're heading for price control. And you don't, believe you me, you do not want to sit in that space. I work in that space, and it is incredibly challenging. Challenging. Now, they've
sorry.
got to change.
Well, the Airport Association reckons they charge what they do simply because there's no competition. And to quote Billy Moore from New Zealand Airports Association, says because they can. Would you agree with that?
In part, it's what she says is correct. They can charge what they like, but we pay. We haven't put our checkbook away, or we haven't put our card away, and there are alternatives, and you do drive, and when the price of airfares gets too high, people say, no, I'm going to drive. However, that still doesn't address the problem, and the problem really is that, and the airports are just as bad as in New Zealand, that all cost price, they all cost and then put a margin on top.
Yes.
And when you've got a monopoly infrastructure like we have with, airways and airports, on top of a sole provider of aviation services on many regional routes, then, there is no incentive for managers to really sharpen up their pens. And quite frankly, Air New Zealand, in my view, has lost the plot in the New Zealand domestic market.
Well said, Irene. Consumer New Zealand's pushing for a ministerial inquiry into airfare pricing, but do you think that would ever go anywhere, Irene? Or is it just another expensive report that will gather dust?
Well, I think, I don't like to sort of look too closely at the supermarket world, but in the bank,
yeah. Where's that gone?
Oh, yawn.
Yeah.
The thing is that it's the instruction from the owner. Who is the owner? The government is the owner of this company.
Yes.
Instruct the managers to sharpen their pens and act like, you can act as though you are in a competitive market. Think about your costs. Sharpen your pen. Instead of complaining that my prices have gone up, my costs have gone up 30%. If you're like me, I go, well, gosh, they have gone up 30%. So what am I going to do about it as a manager? I get stuck in and I look through all of my cost base and I think about, can I make a margin gain here? Can I do this? Can I do that? Now, Air New Zealand used to be extraordinary at doing this. I don't see any of that through their commentary or their response to these pressures. They're looking at it and going, woe is me, 30% inflation. Yeah, that's bad. I agree. I get that.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is that they're turning away their home market in droves. Now, not only does it have implications for them domestically, but in New Zealand relies on us Kiwis to travel on them internationally. And that's when it really, really starts to bite.
Yeah. Interesting, Irene, that the government, as you said, they are 51% of Air New Zealand, and they've banged on about, as you said, sharpening pencils. I mean, look what they've done to the public sector. And they are forever telling managers to, right, go through your books with a line by line with a ruler, and I don't want to see any excess. Why are they so scared to do that with Air New Zealand?
Oh, because, Air New Zealand, it's private, it's quasi-private, got shareholders. I get there's an ownership mix, but at the end of the day, if you operate in the private world, the owners instruct you what to do, and they are very, very precise in terms of their instruction. Well, mine are anyway, in terms of what they want to see achieved. And, I don't think they need to do any inquiries. The government just has to be very clear about what its expectations are of the business that it owns, for goodness sake. Get on with it.
Irene, gosh, I like the fired up, Irene. Let's stay with this because James Meagher, the Associate Transport Minister, says they aren't ruling out underwriting smaller regional airlines to keep fares competitive. I mean, really? I mean, we've just talked about, Tally in New Zealand, what they expect from them. Now he's talking about talking to the smaller regional airlines, the likes of Chatham or Sounds Air, and making sure that, helping them out, giving them a little bit of a float, I suppose. What should they be doing that?
Well, no.
No.
That's the short answer.
That's more money from us, Irene.
Exactly. So the taxpayer ends up owning or partly subsidising